Joining us now is Nicholas Burns, who was Undersecretary of State under President George W. Bush. Good to have you back with us this morning.
Thank you.
Given the history the bill just laid out here, it would seem that the U.S. president and the efforts that they make, really, that's not the issue. It has to be that both the Israelis and the Palestinians actually want this more than anyone else. Wouldn't you say?
Erica, I think that's right. You know, this was a very substantial and important speech that President Obama gave, but for all the goodwill in the world on the part of the United States, it does still take the Israelis and Palestinians to want to come together, to have the political will to make the very tough choices that they need to make on issues like the status of Jerusalem, the right of Palestinian refugees to return, where should the boundaries and borders be between a Palestinian and Israeli state. And we've seen in the past, there are times when the Palestinians have been eager for that agreement, times when the Israelis have. It's rarely been a time when both of them simultaneously have been willing and able to make those big political commitments.
You left your post in 2008. Over the last few years, do you think any progress has been made?
Well, lots of good intentions by the Obama administration and indeed by many people around the world, but the Palestinians have been disunited. You know that Fatah, the government in Ramallah, and Hamas have been divided until very recently. And the Netanyahu government has not exactly been a government that's been willing to make tremendous strides towards peace with the Palestinians. And so hopefully President Obama's speech will now stimulate both sides to make a greater effort and to come together under U.S. leadership. And I do think, Erica, U.S. leadership is absolutely indispensable. We're the only country that has the credibility and trust with both sides to be an effective mediator.
The speech being criticized on both sides this morning. How much of this speech do you think was aimed at gaining a little bit more favor for the United States with the Arab world?
Well, I think, particularly what President Obama said about the negotiations should start with the 1967 borders. That's at the Six-Day War when Israel occupied the West Bank and East Jerusalem. That was a nod toward the Palestinians, and particularly towards Mahmoud Abbas, the moderate leader of Fatah, the Palestinian faction. Hopefully it'll help him to be able to convince the Arab world to support negotiations. And we obviously need to see, as the president said yesterday, Hamas needs to recognize Israel's right to exist. And Hamas needs to give up its support for terrorism. Hopefully this will embolden the moderate Palestinians to have some leverage over the more difficult faction, Hamas, to get into the 21st century and negotiate in good faith with Israel.
I want to get your take on things here at home, because as you mentioned, in your view, the U.S. is indispensable here in these efforts, these negotiations. But this is a speech that has already garnered plenty of criticism here in the U.S. as well, with Americans really across the board, all different backgrounds coming out on this. How important is domestic support?
Well, I think any time the United States needs to make a major move, a major decision on foreign policy, it's always important to have domestic support. I will say, I think this was a very courageous speech by President Obama. It was timely. The ideas, I think, are designed to bring the process forward. If he had stayed with the same old ideas that we have tried in the past and have not materialized, then I think it wouldn't have been a productive step forward. But I give the president a lot of credit for creativity in this speech, for a lot of guts in putting some big issues on the line. I think saying that the negotiations to start at the 67 borders is really in line with where most of the rest of the world, including the United Nations, is. And I think that will help the United States to be an effective mediator.
Nicholas Burns, appreciate your insight this morning. Thank you.
Thank you.